Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Waffle Flower Crafts. In this video, we are going to create a card with the new Stencil-n-Stamp Rose Bouquet Set. This is an awesome set that has a stamp set and a stencil. Let's take a closer look at this set. Right in the front here, you can see that stamp set. That's the Rose Bouquet stamp set. And behind it is actually the stencil. Here's the back of the packaging. Again, you can see kind of an illustration of the stamp set and the stencil. But let's open it up and take a closer look. So here is the stencil. Now I wanted to point out that the stencil, it contains the masks, which is super handy. So those are inside the stencil itself. Before you can use the stencil, you do need to clip off these little tabs to separate the masks from inside the stencils. Definitely keep that little mask there because that can be handy for cards in the future. And I'm just going to go ahead and remove the remaining masks or separate the remaining masks from the main stencil. Now before I do any stenciling, I am going to stamp this outline image for the kind of the sack and the greenery for the bouquet. I'm just going to ink this up in Memento Tuxedo Black, a dye ink, and stamp it. I definitely recommend using a dye ink for this because we're going to immediately start ink blending over this, and you don't want any of that black ink to still be kind of wet and kind of drag over and make a mess. I'm going to grab the stencil here and line up the greenery with those two little greenery sections that I stamped. I'll use a couple pieces of painter's tape to hold the stencil in place, but more importantly to kind of mask that bottom half or that bottom portion of paper so I don't get any green there. And I'm going to just simply ink blend a base here with Mode Lawn Distress ink. After I ink blended that, I'm moving on to a darker shade to create a little gradation. This is Pine Needles Distress ink, and just going to ink blend a little bit of this kind of at the base of all those leaves to just add a little gradation, a little bit more interest. And then I'll remove the stencil. And now I'm going to grab this inside piece of the stencil. It's for the rose bouquet itself, but inside it is the stencil for the sack. So again, I'm going to tape it in place and also kind of use that tape to kind of mask around it so I don't get any of the ink anywhere I don't want it. And then I'm going to start by ink blending a base here with Old Paper Distress ink. After I get that down, I'm going to ink blend a little bit of brushed corduroy right at the bottom and right at the lip of the sack. And that's just going to again create a little gradation, also really give some nice shape and form to that sack. So now that that's done, we're going to move on to our rose bouquet. We're actually going to start by stenciling. So we're going to stencil the base first, or the background for the rose bouquet first, and then we will stamp it. I just found that that was an easier way to make sure I got this this rose bouquet kind of positioned where I want it on this card front or card base, just so I could really get the most out of this A2 panel. And I started by ink blending first with Abandoned Coral, and now I'm finishing up with creating a little gradation with Barn Door here. Again, just a nice gradation for a little bit more interest. After I've ink blended that, I'll remove the stencil, and then I have one more thing to ink blend. I want to ink blend this little bow here. So again, I'm going to position it and then use a couple pieces of painter's tape to hold the stencil in place and to mask. And I'm going to start by ink blending a base here with Tumbled Glass, so just all over that ribbon or bow with that. And then I'll move on to Broken China and just ink blend the edges and the very center with that, just to again give some shape and body to that bow. Now I'm going to finish up here with the little kind of knot for the bow, kind of center it again on that bow, and then ink blend it a little bit more heavy-handedly with the Broken China, and you can see here that creates a lot of dimension to that ribbon and bow. So now we're going to finish up the rose bouquet by simply stamping the detail layer from the stamp set. So I've centered it here over that ink blended stenciled area of the rose bouquet. And now I'm going to ink up the stamp first with Barn Door. After I ink up the kind of the top half with that, then I will ink up the bottom half with Fired Brick. This will also create a gradation on the rose bouquet, but a stamped gradation. So the detail layer will also have a gradation. So I'm just going to stamp it here, and you can already see those details start to pop. And I stamped it a couple more times just to make sure I got a nice bold impression. Now it's time to die cut. So I have the rose bouquet matching die, and I'm going to start by die cutting the roses out first. And this is why I didn't put the rose bouquet right up against the greenery in the sack. I left a little bit of white space so I could die cut that cleanly and have a nice white border. Now I'm going to die cut the sack and the bow. So I'll use a couple pieces of micropore tape to hold that in place, run it through my die cutting machine, and then we'll have our bow and our sack and greenery cut out. But the greenery die doesn't cut the top portion, so you just need some scissors to kind of free that. And now we're ready to kind of put all this together. But I love that we left that little bit of white space there. That's one of the handy reasons why that die doesn't cut the top off, because it allows you to leave some space there so you can adhere the rose bouquet onto that greenery and sack layer. And I just finished by adhering the ribbon right on top. Now I'm going to kind of finish this up by stamping my sentiment. I have an A2 top folding card base made out of heavy weight craft paper, and I just stamped a sentiment from the set in Memento Tuxedo Black. And now I'm going to just finish this up by adding my rose bouquet. I did add some foam tape to the backside, so I just removed the backing, and now I'll just center it here and my card will be complete. And I'll hold it to the camera so you can get a good look at this card. This is such a beautiful set. I love the kind of contrast you have of that black outlined image of the greenery and the sack, and then almost the no-line image of the roses and the bouquet. I just think that's a really fun kind of play. And this is a great set, not just for Valentine's. You could definitely use this for get well cards, just maybe do the roses in a different color, and you can also use those roses separately, that heart of roses separately on your card. That would be really pretty too. There's a lot of fun you can have with this. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I use, please head over to Waffle Flower, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.